Welcome, everyone, to our panel, Are You Ready for the Next Disruption? Lessons on Resilience in an Unpredictable New World. We've actually had a little disruption ourselves in planning, or in actually doing this panel. One of our scheduled attendees, Emma from FixFast, had a last-minute illness and could not join us. So we've had to bring Angus from Akeneo to join Matt from Assa Abloy. So there's some irony in the fact that we had a little disruption ourselves in our panel on disruption. But the show must go on, and so we have Angus and Matt, who we are very happy to have join us. So to kick things off, Matt, can you please introduce yourself, tell us about yourself and Assa Abloy?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So yeah, I've been at Assa Abloy for about 4 years now, and we specialize in door opening solutions, security, software, access control. So not a lot of people know who Assa Abloy are, but chances are everyone in this room today has touched one of our products, whether it be the handle on the way in or the key card for the hotel room. So quite a big business, big brand, but we kind of keep under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that everyone entering the building today probably engaged with one of your products. So it sounds like you're always thinking about your products, where they are.
Yes.
I hear there's a little story with that.
Yeah, I'm terrible for it. So on arrival here yesterday, looking at the hinges, looking at the handles, see if it's one of ours, and they were. But also a couple of years ago in Florida, on a vacation with the kids, standing, waiting to see Mickey Mouse, and I'm just looking at the hinges, I'm not interested, and it was one of ours, so yeah, just, it's a bad habit. But
And your family gets a little sick about hearing about your products all the time, maybe?
yes, yeah, that's one of ours, but yeah.
Great. And so when you joined Assa Abloy, what was your main focus? What were you trying to do?
It was, well, we had to try and identify the problems with getting products to market. So we had various channels. So we had our e-commerce platforms, e-business, so various websites. And because of the brands that we have, so we have over 60 brands in the UK, and it was difficult to identify where's the product information. So we quickly identified what we needed to do, invest in a PIM, and also collaborate, bring all those business units together, the brands, the product managers, their old way of sort of thinking. And yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge and still ongoing today.
Yeah, and some of these disruptions we're going to talk about, I know it kind of helped accelerate that process a little bit for you. Angus, let's switch to you. So thank you for joining us last minute.
Not at all.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a strategist with Akeneo, so that means I work with our customers to map their big corporate goals through to how product experience can help them and then put a value on that. I came to that role through most of my career has been in e-com retail. My first role back in 1995 was in the team in the UK that took the first secure online order for the UK. And then in that career it includes 12 years as e-com director at W.H. Smith, which is a UK-based business. It's the world's oldest retail chain, selling books, stationery, news magazines, on the high street in the UK, but then in airports and railways all around the world.
Great, and 24 hours ago, you were not expecting to be up here with us today.
No.
So my question is, do you feel disrupted yourself, personally?
I'm grateful I packed a jacket and I left the party earlier than I otherwise would have done. But other than that, all good.
Great, well, we're glad to have you here. And so also, Emma couldn't be here today, unfortunately, but she was gracious enough to allow us to still tell her story a little bit. So she's from FixFast, and they're a manufacturer of building fasteners and components in the UK to B2B customers. So we're going to be reviewing several very different events that have impacted Matt and Emma and really a lot of businesses in the UK and around the world. And the first one of these events that we're going to focus on is a very tragic fire that occurred in London in 2017. It was the Grenfell fire. So, Angus, you were in the UK at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about the tragedy and the impact that it had?
Yeah, sure. It's a terrible event. In June 2007, in the night, there was a fire in a tower block in West London with horrible consequences. 72 lives were lost, 70 people were injured, and the 223 who were able to get out lost their houses, lost their homes. It had a huge impact on the local community, but also the wider UK community. It was the biggest residential fire since the Second World War, and had huge repercussions in legislation and for the industry.
And I understand that following this fire, Angus, there was an inquiry. What were the results of this inquiry, and really what impact did it have on industry in the UK?
Yeah. So the inquiry, the fire was in 2017. The inquiry found some initial findings in 2018. That didn't truly come into law until 2022. So substantial gap. The key finding was that combustible materials had been used in the cladding of the building, and that was a critical driver of the tragedy. But given that timeline, the kind of the 5-year span, it meant that whilst important work was going on to understand all the implications and all the changes, the industry was under huge pressure, rightly, to resolve that as quickly as possible, both for buildings that existed and new builds.
And so I was talking to Emma from FixFast, and she had talked about this concept of a golden thread policy. And I understand that's pretty well known in the UK. Can you tell us more about what that is?
Yeah, so the golden thread was to ensure that the new higher standards for building materials were delivered on. And to do that, you had to go right back to the start of the supply chain and all the way through. So architects needed to include it in their designs. Procurement needed to buy the specification that met those requirements. And then in the build, the product not only needs to be the right product, but it needs to be implemented in the right way. And so it achieved the full safety achievements. And I guess it's supply chain in the very full sense, because there was, as you can imagine, a heightened awareness from tenants in existing and new builds around these requirements that, again, you've taken for granted before, but they were very aware of what needed to be done.
And I know for FixFast, having talked to Emma, this was a huge challenge for their entire industry, because suddenly they had to consider this compatibility. And that revolved a lot around product information and sharing that information up and down the supply chain, as Angus had just talked about. And this really put a stress on their ability to manage that information and help them take that first step towards digitalization.
And value became critical as well, in that historically, and the managing director of Emma's business acknowledges this, that the buying criteria in building had been overridingly price cost. But now, kind of more than ever, we generally in the community and the industry understood the absolute genuine value, and value in the wider sense. So, and that's what drove this need for this golden thread.
Matt, how did this impact Assa Abloy?
It did impact us directly during my time, but I know that certain regulations and procedures that we have to follow, there's businesses that we've acquired that specialize in, fire door safety, the regulation, air vents, and, I think those standards are very high, on the cylinders we make, on the sort of handles, the push bars, so a lot of the panic exit that we do. So I guess all of that has been, re-evaluated since that.
Yep. So it just, a fire, it impacts a lot of different industries, construction, and you said fire safety, and I'm sure there are other industries as well that were impacted by this one singular event that really no one could have predicted, right? And at the time, just the long impact, or the long tail of the impact, was several years for all of this to play out. So I want to move on now to another disruption that no one in the entire world was really prepared for. Of course, it's something we're all familiar with, and that is COVID-19. We'll start with you, Matt. Let's go back to February 2020. You had actually just come back from Unlock 2020. I was there too. It was a good time. And I remember hearing about COVID, but I don't think we'd realized at that point that it was going to be such an impactful event. You returned home, and over the next few months, the pandemic really hit. So tell us about how things went, those first few months of COVID at Assa Abloy.
Yeah, it was terrible, as you can all imagine. Like I said, I just got back from Unlock, and everything went into lockdown. And prior to that, the reason to come out and see you guys was that we'd evaluated that we needed to strengthen our PIM solution. We'd already was sort of on a previous version, and the collaboration had started to work, but then it was halted. It impacted all of us really, because we've got manufacturing lines, we manufacture our own products. We was unable to do that. How do we get the stock out to our customers? How do we continue to work together? How do our customers reach us? That old way of working wasn't right. We think that we're in a digital age and we think that we're prepared for it, but until it happens, you have to react.
Yeah, it's tough. Angus, what were you doing at this time, and what were you seeing?
Yeah, I was a freelance e-commerce consultant at the time, which I would say it was quite a good time to be a freelance e-commerce consultant, because the impact was that businesses were having to challenge what they were doing online. They needed to get online, or they needed to reprioritize online and do something different with it. And what I found was businesses that suddenly shine the light on their online business, and that had quite big implications. And a lot of the conversations I were having were around just getting back to the fundamentals. You've put a lot more volume through a channel, or you've taken a lot more volume because it's your customers don't have another opportunity. But the economics are still pretty much the same. There's an example. I worked with an alcohol brand. They'd lost their opportunity to sell through grocery, and had started to do something in D2C. It was quite a small part of their business. It suddenly became a very large part of their business. But the first conversation I had with them was to understand how it was performing. They were really pleased because they were seeing this great volume. I had to explain to them that they were losing money on every single sale. And like I say, back to the fundamentals. E-commerce can't be that kind of side channel that you can say is sampling, or you can kind of make a kind of marketing case for it. It has to play with all your other channels.
Yeah, so these businesses that had maybe started to explore digital commerce a little bit, maybe weren't quite doing it as well as they should have, suddenly had to do everything through that digital channel, and we're quickly finding that things weren't as good as they should have been.
Exactly.
Yeah. Back to you, Matt. So when COVID hit, you did have Akeneo. You guys have been customers of ours for quite some time. But as we talked about before the panel, you were still using it mostly as an IT solution. But COVID really made you recommit to Akeneo. You were at Unlock, so you were already realizing that you needed to recommit to it. But COVID really kind of pushed that. So talk to us about why you recommitted to Akeneo and really how you went about doing this.
Well, we were in the position to push more products online, and I think COVID helped us do it quicker, get out to our customers on our e-commerce platforms, but also what structure was the data in? Because during pre-COVID and pre-Unlock, we had data everywhere, in product managers' minds, on a piece of paper, Excel spreadsheets, and the various businesses that we've onboarded over time as well come with their own systems and solutions and way of working. So the main challenge, how do we quickly get everybody together, on teams, collaborating, working with product managers to try and kickstart our PIM journey. Even though we'd worked with you guys previously, it wasn't until we adopted 5.0 that, we really saw the benefit. And so plenty of calls every day. It brought together the team as well, because you have product managers from different brands that wouldn't necessarily work with one another. And it was great building the attributes, the options, making sure that, is that a customer requirement? Would they like to see that? Is that a feature they need? Can they search for that feature? Something that we'd never explored before, that was sort of promoted to us as a challenge. It's made us work smarter and differently, and try and get those products out to as quick as possible, but as enriched as possible.
Yeah. So it sounds like before each brand was kind of doing their own thing, and a lot of that knowledge or information was siloed, really. And COVID kind of made you guys get everyone mobilized and centralized and standardized so that you could meet these new challenges. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, very risky as well because, a lot of staff during the time were furloughed. So the government scheme where, it was sort of just putting people to one side. You're not needed yet, but you will be. I was one of those. But also that product knowledge goes. If it's out of the business and our customers are still trying to, provide a living for themselves, provide a service, we're trying to continue as, business as usual to an extent. Missing those key knowledge bases was very painful, and it could have caused bigger disruption to the business. That quickly identified that we need a single source of truth. We need to get everybody together. We need to get it all into one system. And COVID pushed us to do it quicker.
Yeah. And so, Matt, during COVID, you made another big change. You actually added a new way to engage with your customers. Tell us about this new way.
Yeah, so digital age, customers constantly on their phones, even, we work during times that we should switch off, and, we're constantly on our mobile devices. So we sort of enabled a mobile app, and we pushed our products to that. We pushed data sheets, resources. We gave our customers access to information that ordinarily they may have spoken to somebody about. So we developed a mobile app, pushed it out in the October, and massive success with that. Customers were able to still engage with us, but in a new format, and it also enabled the sort of lockdown protocols to be manipulated a little bit, because we had technical service teams that weren't able to go out on site, actually give the power to the customer to use their mobile device as a way of working with the technical resource. So you can use the mobile app to live stream door fittings, or scoping out business issues. There may be an error or faulty product, and live stream straight to the technical support team. They can see it on the screen, real time, as if we were out on site, and that really helped. And within that, technical resource could send data sheets, straight to the fingertips of the customer.
Yep. And so this app, how did they get their product information? What enabled you to launch this app so quickly?
The use of the PIM, but also we work with print as well. So print data sheets has helped us massively. Again, product knowledge, information, anywhere and everywhere within the business. And that single source of truth with Akeneo really helped us push those data sheets out to the fingertips of the customers, but also working with print as well. It gave us massive opportunities to get those data sheets out quicker. Live data, we're constantly enriching product. I think we do about 1,200 levels of enrichment a day on average. And those changes are tracked, it's live, and they're pushed out directly to our customers. So that's really helped us facilitate our customers' needs.
Yeah. And I understand this app also supports your customer success representatives. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so they can call in. So it basically is a one-stop shop. So they can do e-commerce on there, direct to our web shop, access everything that they need, but also call in. So we can email, we can gain technical support, we can call directly into the specific brands that we have listed. So our customers can find us a little bit easier as well. Whereas because we're Assa Abloy, customers know who they're dealing with, but there may be a different brand that they'd like to explore, and it gave them a better customer experience, because that's what we all want.
Mm-hmm. And so the CSR team is able to engage with the app, and of course Akeneo is feeding all of that product information. And I love this example because it's sometimes overlooked. People focus so much on digital commerce, e-commerce, right? And there's so many other customer touch points, and that customer support role is something we're seeing more and more, and is very important. It's really critical to that customer experience. So I want to talk quickly about Emma and Fix Fast, just a comment for them. They face many of the same challenges that Matt had talked about. They weren't using Akeneo at this time, but talking to Emma, she was saying that the few teams that were digitized did much better, and the ones that weren't struggled, right? People were locked out of their offices, people were furloughed, people were sick, and this internally, they realized, hey, we need to become more digital because our entire operations have been disrupted, and that again started to push them towards looking for a solution. Angus, let's close with you on this COVID topic. Broadly speaking, how did you see companies respond to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, as you said at the top, COVID impacted every person, every business, and there was a huge amount of sort of enforced test and learn as a consequence. A huge amount of data was understood about new opportunities. But I've broadly seen two groups of businesses, and it reflects sort of Emma and Matt, your experience, that the first group either had the foundations in place or built the foundations in lockdown, and the second group just came up with quick fixes. They didn't have the foundations and didn't set the foundations. And those two groups have now got quite different choices. The first group are ready to think about, I guess, in the concept of products, new product ranges, new markets, new channels. The second group are really having to think about, do they need to reset and go back and fix the things that are stuck together with sticky tape right now before they can kind of make those next choices. So yeah, I think it's huge amounts been learned and a huge amount about the business cases. So I think what both sets of businesses are armed with now is an understanding of channels, opportunities that they can put benefits to, that they can now justify making those changes to the fundamentals of the business.
Yeah, it's added a lot of pressure to everyone's business model. It's tested it. Great. So enough about COVID. We've all heard a lot about COVID over the past few years. Let's move on to another disruption that Assa Abloy faced, Fix Fast faced, and many UK businesses faced. And that, of course, is Brexit, which started in 2020 but is still playing out today with some regulatory changes. Angus, talk to us about Brexit. What did this mean for UK businesses?
Yeah, so and I guess it's another example of a type of disruption. It's something that you took for granted, and then everything changes. So if you're trading with Europe, there were some things that were established, and you could work in a way you'd worked for a number of years. With Brexit came uncertainty in almost every dimension. So there were very few real fixed points that a business could plan around. There were deadlines when new relationships with Europe were due to be agreed, which in a number of cases slipped. The scope of the change, is it around trade? Is it around people? That was up in the air. The regulations that then were going to flow from it, where were we going to be different in the UK from Europe? And then the consequences of that uncertainty, so businesses trying to keep their options open, led to bottlenecks in supply chains, because you had to get the stock in the right place, because you never knew when notionally a barrier could come down, a legislative barrier could come down, but that could actually turn into a physical barrier that meant you couldn't get stock into the country. So yeah, a huge amount of uncertainty, and then you can lay on top of that it being a hugely contentious issue. So you've got people who actively want it to work, and people who took a different view. So yeah, it's and a lot of that's still out there.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty and guesswork. Yeah. Matt, how did it impact you over at Assa Abloy?
Yeah, well, similar, and I think there was something that Emma touched on about the CE standard that's changed, and all of our packaging. That's something that we're exploring now, because we have to change all our labels on anything that's produced in the UK, and I think anything that's imported. But one of the big topics at the moment, and something that we're sort of trying to kickstart, is sustainability. The sort of plastic packaging tax. And yeah, so I don't personally, in the role that I do, feel affected by Brexit, but I know that we're reacting within the business, and PIM is at the forefront of that. You know, how do we report on that data? How do we calculate the total packaging that we're using? So that's something that we're desperately trying to kick off and understand, as I'm sure a lot of businesses are, specifically in the UK as well. So yeah.
Yep, and you mentioned Emma and FixFast. So they actually did not have Akeneo until last year, and they'd gone through these disruptions, and they slowly moved towards this realization and got the momentum in place to invest in Akeneo. And I know that CE regulation and some of the changes with Brexit are kind of one of the first disruptions that they've been able to navigate with Akeneo, and they found that it's helped them adapt to these unknowns that Angus was talking about. So Angus, what were your specific Brexit experiences? You talked to us broadly, but I know at the time.
I was standing stationary online at the time, and quite a substantial amount of that, those lines were coming from Europe, so we needed to manage our way through the big back-to-school season, then through Christmas season. And in order to do that, we faced the price premium on warehousing in the UK that everyone else was facing. Manufacturing businesses were building up stock so they could keep just in time, continuing to work. We needed space to buy in advance, but that then had huge implications for our customer offer, because we couldn't put an initial order through for some stock and see how it sold and then adjust depending on what the best lines were. We had to take calls much earlier on, make some punts on some offers, and then the implication of that coming out the back end was you're going to end up with overstocks in some areas. You're going to have to be discounting in different ways. You're going to have to clear stock because you don't want to be paying these premium warehouse fees for too long. So it created a whole bunch of businesses in kind of from a work perspective. And as a consumer, it had a big impact on, not a significant thing, but we have a blue car now rather than the green car, because the green car we wanted was going to get delivered from Spain the week after one of these deadlines was going to happen. And it looked like there wasn't going to be an agreement, and if there wasn't an agreement, there was going to be a 10% import tax on that car. So we went for the blue one that was going to arrive a week before, just to avoid it. Now, obviously, that deadline slipped, and that's kind of what it was like living with it. But it's, that was just one small consumer making a different decision. You've got millions of consumers making decisions like that, which, again, businesses are trying to work with.
Businesses, of course, try to predict that, and it's hard to get ahead of it, right? You just kind of have to wait and see what happens. All right, so there's one last disruption that I want to talk about. Let's see there we go. And it's a bit cliche, but I think it's very universal, and that disruption is time. No business can sit on its laurels and expect to continue operating the same way in perpetuity. Customer and employee demographics are always changing and always evolving, and technologies change. So it's really the ultimate disruptors. Matt, how do you make sure that you continue to innovate at Assa Abloy?
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with good people that drive those changes as well, but also listen to the customer. We're trying to empower the customer for them to want to find it easy to deal with us and to want to deal with us. And we've done that by implementing shared catalogs just recently. So that's a complete self-serve portal for our customers. They can get price lists, imagery, brochures, data sheets. So we're constantly enriching those for the customers to have access to and perhaps use and replicate for their own business. So we're giving the customers the tools to do the job, and we're empowering our product managers, our marketing teams, just to try and future-proof, to try and get ahead, because we feel that we are one step ahead every time, and we've got that drive and the desire. But again, we don't know what's around the corner. We can only learn from our mistakes. But I think it's been a good opportunity for us to move quicker, try and get ahead of the curve a little bit.
And you're part of the UK division of Assa Abloy, which of course is a very large company, international company. And you've really set the precedence in terms of using technology and investing in building these compelling product experiences for customers, with that focus on customers. How have the other business units in the company, most of them who aren't using Akeneo, how have they reacted to your successes and kind of viewed what you've been doing?
I think it's about sort of integrating with those teams as well. I personally like to go 100 mile an hour. I sort of implement and then ask questions afterwards. Like I feel if it's a necessary need for the customer, if it's going to benefit them, why not? But then I have to then take my hat off and be like, where's the red tape? What haven't I seen? So it's good to collaborate with those other divisions, with the rest of EMEA that sort of roll out into different territories. They have their own PIM systems. But I think with the way that we've gone to market, we launched 3 brand new websites last year, all coming from the PIM. We've worked with various system integrators. We map via APIs, which is very powerful. So I think, we've got that mindset and we've almost sort of built a blueprint that we hope we can filter over into other territories. But we've all got the same goal, and we want to achieve great success, so.
Angus, what advice would you give to audience members looking to future-proof their own organizations? Matt just talked about this, how they look to future-proof. What advice would you give for the audience for this, to get ahead of this next totally unknown disruption, right? No one really could have predicted any of these disruptions, maybe Brexit, but how do you get ahead of it? How do you future-proof yourself?
Yeah, the time is the challenge, and the issue is that for businesses to be successful, they have to make choices. You can't do a bit of everything and expect to succeed. You have to have a focus, and therefore, the challenge is you're going to base that on the facts that are available at the time. I think what we've kind of talked about this morning is those facts come at you fast and change fast. And we've not even touched on cost of living, energy prices, and what, like say, whatever's next over the hill. So I think at a very high level, you plan for what you can expect. You have to take some assumptions about what you think is going to come, but then ultimately you need to be agile for what you can't. And once you're agile, you're then able to adapt your priorities and your choices as you go along, but also you can keep your options open, because the last thing you want to do is to box yourself into a corner, have one route where you're heavily reliant on, and then find that something's disrupted that one and you haven't got another way around. And it kind of goes back to that 2 groups of companies we talked about earlier. Those who have put those foundations in that enable them to make the choices going forward, and those who have potentially now done a series of quick fix, reactive actions, which, given there's been so many responses to have to come up with recently, particularly in the UK, the sum cost of those short-term fixes is now probably more than the getting the foundations right and having that flexibility. So I guess that would be my overview, and that certainly comes back to the conversations I'm having with the customers and beyond.
Yeah, and we were talking a little before this, and you talked about how, you're focused, if you're just focused on these quick fixes, what if you get 2 or 3 disruptions that come really quickly, right? You're kind of bogged down by one, and the next one comes.
Yeah, you might not finish the first before you got to tack again, and then you're further impacted because not only you've not got it in, but you've not got the data to understand. Should we get back and try and pursue that at some point? So it's compounds. So.
Yeah. Matt, does your organization look at product experiences differently now than they have in the past, now that you've kind of gone through all that you've gone through in the last 3 to 5 years?
I think so. I think there's still challenges within. There's still challenges to, get the buy-in of the stakeholders in certain units. They believe that their route to market is the best way, but it's a rigid way of thinking. But those that have adapted it and really adopted what we're trying to achieve have seen massive success. like I say, we launched 3 brand new websites last year. We've just launched product model, so that's something that, we were painfully trying to get out there to, again, it's all about the customer experience. And I think if we're not listening to those, it's, that's part of the problem. But the PIM is the sort of single source of truth. We like that word and we use it a lot. And it enables us to future-proof, product managers, we could be disrupted. Even the stakeholders, they could be disrupted, but the business needs to continue. And I think that's sort of one of the messages that we're trying to get through to them. They're slowly starting to, loosen up their wallets a little bit and, put some financial, put something forward because it is important. And the last 3 years has really shown us that.
Yeah, it's great to see that you've gotten some great momentum with those that have bought in and hopefully are working on those those holdouts that maybe still need to be convinced a bit. So we have some final takeaways from this session. So the first one, and I think everyone who touched on this, is it's important to be proactive instead of reactive. Sometimes you do have to react. You can't always anticipate what's going on, but if you have the tools in place and you get things cleaned up, when you do have to be reactive, it's much easier to do instead of those duct tape fixes that Angus was just talking about. You want to build that single source of trusted truth. This is something that Matt, I think, has said multiple times. When your teams are thrown every which way because of some disruption, having a reliable source of data is really important and allows you to pivot quickly. Always look for new ways to leverage product experiences. Matt and Assa Abloy really did this with their new app, right? So COVID hit and they used Akeneo and some other tools. They built out an app, a new way to reach their customers. So it's very important. And then lastly, you need to get stakeholder buy-in. So Matt had talked a little bit about the product managers. Before COVID, maybe they weren't all using Akeneo, they weren't all bought in. This disruption came, he was able to get that buy-in, get a lot more momentum. So it's really important when you're trying to think or plan, future-proof yourself for these next disruptions, that you have all the right people in the room, everyone's on the same page, and everyone is aligned. So that is the conclusion of our panel. I want to thank Matt and Angus for joining us and sharing our story. Thank you.